Most people in this country walk around with damaged kidneys and have no idea. No pain, no warning sign, just a quiet, slow decline, until one day a routine blood test comes back and a doctor says the word chronic. That's not a scare tactic. That's the clinical reality for over 37 million Americans right now, and the majority of them were never told that what they ate every single day was either protecting those kidneys or accelerating their damage. My name is Dr. Nathan Wells. I'm a board-certified internal medicine physician, and for over 20 years I've focused specifically on adults over 50, the population most likely to be walking around with silent kidney stress and the least likely to have a doctor sit down and explain what they can actually do about it at home. I've reviewed hundreds of patient labs, adjusted dozens of medication regimens because of kidney function changes, and spent a lot of time asking myself why this topic gets so little airtime compared to heart disease or diabetes. The kidneys don't get their own awareness month. Nobody walks for them, but they should. Here's what the National Kidney Foundation reported as recently as 2023. 9 out of 10 adults with chronic kidney disease don't know they have it. 9 out of 10. That means if you're over 50 and you've never had a specific kidney panel done, not just a basic metabolic panel, but an eGFR and a urine albumin to creatinine ratio, you could be sitting in that group right now. Your kidneys filter about 200 liters of blood every single day. And when that filtration starts slipping, your blood pressure climbs, your waste products build up, and your cardiovascular risk doubles. What I'm going to walk you through today is a single ingredient, one you've almost certainly had in your kitchen, probably bought for under $2, that has a meaningful body of research behind it specifically for kidney support in adults over 50. I'll name it in just a moment. I'll explain how it works, what the research actually says, exactly how to use it, and who needs to be careful. By the end of this, you'll have 2 specific lab numbers to write down and a very short shopping list. Now, before I name the ingredient, I want to tell you something about the 2 weeks in the title, because I'd rather explain it now than have you feel misled later. What happens in the first 2 weeks is measurable and real. Most people who use this correctly see their fasting blood glucose numbers start moving within 14 days, and blood glucose is one of the 2 primary drivers of kidney decline. The deeper kidney benefit, the actual eGFR improvement, takes 8 to 12 weeks of consistent daily use. That's the honest picture. 2 weeks is when the engine starts turning over. 8 weeks is when the car is moving. I'll show you the exact patient numbers that illustrate both. One thing before we go further, everything I share here is medical education, not a prescription for your specific situation. Your doctor knows your full history, your medications, your labs. Please use this as a starting point for a conversation with them, not a replacement for one. If this kind of direct, no-nonsense health information is what you're looking for, hit subscribe. I put out a video like this every week. The ingredient is apple cider vinegar. Specifically raw, unfiltered apple cider vinegar with what's called the mother, the cloudy, stringy sediment at the bottom of the bottle that most people shake up and ignore, or honestly, find a little off-putting. I want to stop here for a second, because I can already hear some of you thinking, apple cider vinegar? That's it? I've seen that on the shelf for years. Stay with me, because the question isn't whether you've heard of it. The question is whether you've understood what it actually does inside the body at the cellular level. And the answer, for almost everyone, is no. The mechanism is not what people think it is, and the specific form matters enormously. The filtered, clear grocery store variety has had the beneficial microbial colonies and most of the polyphenols stripped out in processing. It is a chemically different product. Raw and unfiltered is what every study I'm going to cite used. Apple cider vinegar is made through a 2-stage fermentation process. Crushed apples are exposed to yeast, which converts the natural fruit sugars into alcohol. Then acetic acid bacteria convert that alcohol into acetic acid, the primary active compound, along with organic acids, polyphenols, and the live microbial cultures that form the mother. A tablespoon of raw apple cider vinegar contains roughly 750 to 800 milligrams of acetic acid, plus trace malic acid, citric acid, and a cluster of antioxidant polyphenols from the original apple. That combination is why the raw version behaves differently in the body than the filtered one. Why does any of this matter for kidneys specifically? There are 4 mechanisms. I want to walk through each one carefully because understanding the why is what converts a 2-week experiment into a 12-week habit, which is exactly the duration where the meaningful data lives. But first, let me give you the context you need to understand why these mechanisms matter, because if you don't know what your kidneys are actually doing all day, the mechanisms will feel abstract. Think of your kidneys as the most sophisticated filtration system ever built, except instead of filtering tap water, they're processing your entire blood supply multiple times a day, pulling out metabolic waste, excess minerals, fluid, and toxins, then deciding with extraordinary precision how much of each thing to send back into circulation and how much to push out in urine. Your kidney tubules regulate your blood potassium to within a fraction of a millimole per liter. Too high and your heart can stop. Too low and your muscles fail. Your kidneys are running those calibrations constantly, silently, without you feeling a thing, until the day they can't keep up. When kidney function starts declining, the medical measure is eGFR, estimated glomerular filtration rate, the number of milliliters of blood your kidneys filter per minute. A healthy adult over 50 has an eGFR roughly between 75 and 90. Below 60, you're in early chronic kidney disease. Below 30, dialysis becomes a real conversation. The drop from 75 to 60 can take years and feel like nothing at all. That silence is the danger. What accelerates that drop? High blood pressure batters the small blood vessels inside the kidney's filtering units, called glomeruli, like water pressure slowly eroding a pipe joint. Uncontrolled blood sugar coats those same vessels in glucose, stiffening and scarring them. Chronic low-grade inflammation drives oxidative stress directly into kidney tissue. And here's something most patients never hear from their doctor. A diet chronically high in ultra-processed foods, sodium, and phosphate additives accelerates kidney aging independent of blood pressure or diabetes. You don't have to be diabetic for your diet to be quietly damaging your kidneys right now. I want to tell you about a patient I'll call Miriam, 67 years old, retired school administrator, completely asymptomatic. She came in for a routine physical and her eGFR came back at 58. She had no idea. Her blood pressure was borderline high, 138/86, and she'd been managing it with one medication for about 4 years. When I asked about her diet, she described what a lot of people in her situation eat: not terrible, not great. Canned goods for convenience, some processed foods, a diet that looked fine on the surface but lacked anything specifically protective of kidney tissue. We talked for close to 40 minutes that day, longer than most appointments. I gave her a short list of practical changes. Apple cider vinegar before dinner was one of them. Come back to Miriam in a moment. Her 6-month numbers are worth waiting for. Now, the 4 mechanisms, starting with the one most people don't expect. The first is acid-base balance. Your kidneys spend a significant portion of their daily energy maintaining blood pH in the narrow range of 7.35 to 7.45. When your body runs acidic, a condition called metabolic acidosis, which is extremely common in people with even mild kidney decline, the kidneys have to work harder to excrete that acid load. They essentially go into overtime buffering what your diet keeps producing. A 2015 study published in BMC Nephrology found that dietary acid load was an independent predictor of kidney disease progression. The more acidic your diet, the faster your eGFR declined, regardless of other factors. Raw apple cider vinegar, despite being acidic in the bottle, has an alkalizing effect once metabolized. The acetic acid breaks down inside the body, and the net result is a reduction in the acid burden your kidneys have to process. Think of it like installing a pre-filter in front of the main filtration system. Less total load reaching the primary units. The second mechanism is blood sugar regulation, and this is where the strongest human trial data lives. A landmark study from Arizona State University, published in Diabetes Care, found that 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar taken before a high-carbohydrate meal reduced post-meal blood glucose spikes by 19 to 34% in adults with insulin resistance. The mechanism is documented. Acetic acid inhibits the enzyme alpha amylase in the small intestine, which slows the breakdown of complex carbohydrates into glucose. What reaches your bloodstream is a slower, smaller wave instead of a sharp spike. For kidneys, this matters because every blood sugar spike, even in people who aren't technically diabetic, triggers an insulin response that contributes over time to the same glomerular scarring that diabetes causes in a more dramatic form. 14 days of consistent use before meals is enough time for measurable changes to appear in fasting glucose for many patients. That's the 2 weeks in the title. Not kidney function yet. That comes later. Blood sugar first. The third mechanism is blood pressure modulation. A 2021 systematic review in the Journal of Functional Foods analyzed multiple randomized controlled trials on acetic acid consumption and found statistically significant reductions in systolic blood pressure, the top number, averaging 4 to 6 millimeters of mercury over 8 to 12 weeks of regular use. 4 to 6 points might sound modest, but the research is unambiguous. For every 10-point reduction in systolic blood pressure in a patient with kidney disease, the rate of eGFR decline slows in a clinically meaningful way. Less pressure means less mechanical wear on those glomerular vessels I described earlier. Here's something I want you to sit with for a moment before I give you the fourth mechanism. You've just heard that apple cider vinegar independently addresses 2 of the 3 primary drivers of kidney decline: blood sugar and blood pressure. Most prescription interventions target 1. This $2 bottle is working on 2 simultaneously through separate pathways. That is not nothing. That is the kind of finding that takes years to move from research into clinical conversation, and most of my patients have never heard it because nobody sat down and explained it to them. The fourth mechanism is the least publicized and, honestly, the one I find most compelling. Raw apple cider vinegar contains chlorogenic acid and other polyphenols that function as direct antioxidants inside kidney tissue. Oxidative stress, cellular damage from free radicals, is a primary driver of kidney fibrosis, the irreversible scarring that forms when kidney cells die and get replaced by non-functional scar tissue. Research examining acetic acid's effect on kidney oxidative markers has demonstrated measurable reductions in those markers in kidney tissue specifically, not just systemically. Human studies on this particular mechanism are still catching up to the animal data, and I want to be honest about that. But the biological rationale is solid, and the direction of the evidence is consistent. I want to tell you about a patient I'll call Gerald, 71 years old, retired contractor with type 2 diabetes managed on metformin and 1 blood pressure medication. Gerald's eGFR had been sitting at 61 for about 2 years, stable but not moving. His nephrologist told him to watch his protein intake and come back in 6 months. Gerald is the kind of patient who shows up with notes. He'd been reading about apple cider vinegar and asked me directly what I thought. I gave him the honest answer. The mechanism is plausible. The blood sugar data is solid. The blood pressure data is emerging. And for most people over 50 without specific contraindications, a well-diluted daily dose carries low risk. We agreed he'd try it for 12 weeks and recheck his eGFR and fasting glucose at the end. His fasting glucose dropped from 118 to 104. His eGFR moved from 61 to 66. That is one patient with all the limitations that implies. Not a clinical trial, not a guarantee. But 66 is meaningfully better than 61, and he hasn't stopped. If you're finding this useful and you want to make sure you don't miss the next video, now is a good time to subscribe. And drop a comment telling me, have you ever asked your doctor specifically for your eGFR number? Not just, are my kidneys okay, but the actual number. Most people get told everything looks fine without ever hearing that figure. I want to know how common that is. Now let's talk about how to actually use this, because there's a right way and a wrong way, and the wrong way causes genuine damage. 1 to 2 tablespoons of raw, unfiltered apple cider vinegar, diluted in at least 8 ounces of water. Never drink it straight. Undiluted, it has a pH around 2.5 to 3.0, comparable to stomach acid, and repeated direct contact with tooth enamel and the esophagus causes real erosion over time. Diluted in water, the acidity is buffered substantially while the active compounds still reach the small intestine where the blood sugar mechanism operates. Timing matters most for the glucose benefit. 15 to 20 minutes before your largest meal, typically dinner for most people, is when the blood sugar suppression is strongest. For the acid load and antioxidant effects, timing is less critical. Before dinner covers all 4 mechanisms in one shot. Start small, 1 teaspoon in 8 ounces of water for the first week, then 1 tablespoon, then 2 tablespoons if you tolerate it well. Some people experience nausea or throat irritation early on at higher doses. Building up gradually eliminates that problem for most people. Drink through a straw and rinse your mouth with plain water afterward. Enamel doesn't regenerate, and this step takes 5 seconds. Consistency matters more than the dose. Every single study showing meaningful changes in eGFR, blood glucose, or blood pressure used daily, consistent intake over 8 to 12 weeks. 2 weeks of sporadic use won't replicate those results. The 14-day mark is when the metabolic signaling starts shifting. The 8-week mark is when the downstream kidney data starts moving. You need both. Now, who needs to be careful? And I want to be direct here because some of these interactions are serious. If you take insulin or any medication that lowers blood sugar, glipizide, glympyride, any sulfonylurea, apple cider vinegar's glucose-lowering effect compounds with those medications and can push your blood sugar dangerously low. Hypoglycemia in adults over 60 is not just uncomfortable, it can trigger cardiac arrhythmias and fall events. Do not add this without talking to your doctor first if you are on any diabetes medication. If you take digoxin or any diuretic, furosemide, hydrochlorothiazide, spironolactone, there is a pharmacological concern around electrolyte shifting that isn't yet extensively studied but is real enough to flag. Same instruction. Talk to your doctor first. If you have a diagnosed kidney condition that affects potassium regulation, be specifically cautious. Apple cider vinegar influences potassium balance through its acid-base effects, and in kidneys already struggling to regulate potassium, that shift can occasionally move levels in the wrong direction. And if you have a history of gastroparesis, delayed stomach emptying, apple cider vinegar can worsen that condition by further slowing gastric transit. This affects a small percentage of people over 50, but it's worth knowing before you start. For a healthy adult over 50 with no major kidney diagnosis, no diabetes medications, and no digoxin, this is one of the lowest risk, lowest cost dietary interventions in the senior health literature. The risk-to-benefit ratio is, frankly, hard to argue with. Now back to Miriam. 6 months after that 40-minute conversation, she came back in for a recheck. Her eGFR had climbed from 58 to 64. Her blood pressure was down to 132/80 without any change to her medication. When I asked what made the difference, she said it wasn't any single thing. It was that she finally understood what was happening inside her body. That understanding, she told me, turned the daily habit from a chore into something that felt like self-respect. That's a phrase I've thought about many times since. The research on apple cider vinegar and kidney health is not complete. There is no large-scale, double-blind, placebo-controlled human trial with the sample size that would fully satisfy a nephrologist. I want to be transparent about that. What exists is strong mechanistic plausibility, well-replicated human trial data on blood sugar and blood pressure, both confirmed accelerants of kidney decline, and a growing body of observational and animal data pointing consistently in the same direction. For a $2 intervention with a safety profile this clean, that evidence base is more than enough to have a real conversation with your doctor. Write down 2 acronyms right now, eGFR and UACR, urine albumin to creatinine ratio. Those two numbers tell you more about the actual state of your kidneys than almost anything else on a standard panel, and most doctors won't order them unless you ask. You have every right to ask. At your next visit, say those two acronyms out loud and ask for the numbers. That conversation could change your next 5 years. There is a version of the next 12 weeks where your blood sugar is running quieter, your blood pressure is a few points lower, and your kidneys are working against a smaller acid load every single day, all because of one consistent, informed, inexpensive decision you made. That version is available to you right now for under $2.